Hello and welcome to my office here in Berkeley, California. Office hours. You're here at my office hours. It's just a half hour, but it's an we'll call it office hours. And oh, please don't forget, if you want to share this with your friends right now, because this is live. I mean, this is not a video. This is not something that was filmed and canned before. This is live, and there's something about live. I mean, you're there, and I'm here, and this, this is different on Facebook, and there's no, there's no script, so it's just you and me. Okay? Oh, a couple of things. We reached, now, I just want to, if you haven't had a chance to celebrate jointly, we did reach 1 million likes or followers or whatever they're called, and I just want to do, it's a little party trick. It's celebration. The other thing I wanted to suggest to you, there's a little button that you can push to subscribe to this weekly little direct feed, if you'd like to, and the button should be somewhere on your screen. I think it's over there. Is it over there? Oh, it's over there. Okay, it's over there. There's a little button over there. It says subscribe. If you'd like to subscribe, subscribe, and that means that every week you can do exactly what you're doing now. So I don't know why you should want to subscribe. But anyway, do subscribe, that little button. Okay, now to some serious thing. We're going to talk about politics. I have some recommendations for you, and then I am going to answer your questions. But first of all, little visual aid. The Republicans, this is what do you think of my cartooning? What do you think? Yeah, I know. Okay, here's Trump, and here's Cruz, and here's Rubio. After Monday, so people ask me, what does it all mean? And you've read and heard a lot of commentary. For my 2 cents, I think Trump is not exactly finished, but it's going to be very, very difficult for him to make a comeback. It's like the emperor's new clothes. Suddenly somebody says, he's not wearing any clothes. He really, that brashness, that braggadocio, the notion that he's number one. Well, it's hard for him to hold on to that if he's no longer number one. In other words, Trump's entire sort of attraction, to the extent that anybody was attracted to him, was based on the notion he couldn't lose. But he lost. And I think that's going to kind of fundamentally erode what he had. People are going to see the fake, the bigot, the vain, kind of crazy narcissist that is there, that is behind Donald Trump. Ted Cruz, obviously the winner on Monday, the Republican winner, but I have not met, in all my years of American politics, I have never encountered anybody, and I don't know Ted Cruz, I'm just saying encountered in terms of hearing about, responding to, anybody who is as detested by his colleagues, by Republicans who work with him, by people who have worked with him in the past, as Ted Cruz. I just don't see how it's possible. I mean, to some extent, you need other people to win, and you need, not necessarily the Republican establishment, but you need at least some people around you who like you. Don't you? I mean, likability is at least some quality. There are other problems with Cruz, which we will get to in the future, but I think he's really also on the way down. I would be very surprised if he made much hay, even after New Hampshire, maybe even in New Hampshire. And that brings us to Marco Rubio. Now, here's the thing you ought to know about Marco Rubio. I mean, he scored number 3 in Iowa. But that was a signal to the Republican establishment. And by Republican establishment, I simply mean the major lobbyists, the biggest donors, Wall Street, corporate America, biggest corporations, in the Republican Party. They have been looking for their candidate. They are split between Bush and Christie and Rubio and a lot of others. Well, this fact that Rubio scored 3rd, suddenly they're saying to themselves, this is our establishment man. And Rubio suddenly becomes the establishment candidate. Others drop out. The candidates either drop out or their funding dries up or the establishment says, we are now coalescing behind one. He's the coalescing behind. So you're going to hear more and more about Marco Rubio as the establishment candidate, which is ironic because in, 2010, remember, he was elected to the Senate as the Tea Party favorite. He was not the establishment favorite. I mean, it shows you how desperate the Republican establishment has to be to anoint Marco Rubio as the only acceptable one for them, but he is being anointed. Marco Rubio, actually, he has shown signs in the past of being an establishment candidate in this respect. As senator from Florida, he obviously was concerned about sugar. I mean, a big agricultural commodity in Florida. And Rubio kind of engineered a lot of sugar subsidies. And it's corporate welfare, obviously. There's no reason that any agricultural product should get taxpayer money. But Rubio said and repeated on the Senate floor and elsewhere that he was doing it out of a concern for national defense. You get the connection? Sugar, national defense? I don't. There's no connection. He said it was because we wanted to make sure that we would have control over United States sugar supplies in the event of a national emergency. What? So what does that mean? We have a national emergency and there's a fundamental danger. We don't have sugar, we don't have chocolate, we don't have candy? A candy emergency. He was, well, the other thing I want to just remind you about Rubio, is that Marco Rubio was the most enthusiastic Republican senator for what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton wanted to do in Libya, which was overthrow the Libyan regime in 2011. You remember that, part of the all of that Arab Spring and summer, which proved to be incredibly stupid. I mean, if you overthrow a regime and you don't have anything to replace it, you create a power vacuum, which creates danger. I mean, that's why that power vacuum in so many of those countries has been filled by radicals, Islamic radicals, ISIS radicals. Well, Marco Rubio was one of those enthusiasts to get rid of the Libyan regime. So in other words, to summarize what we have on the Republican side, it's not great, folks. Which brings us to the Democrats. We've got Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders now storming through New Hampshire on their way to the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. Obviously, the Republicans are doing the same thing. And Hillary has just made a decision that she's going to stay in New Hampshire, not going to go to Nevada or South Carolina. The future primary is going to stay there. Bernie is also there. Let me just say, the Monday's caucus, the big news, I mean, the expectations were that Hillary was going to take it. She's got the best organization. She has the most powerful political arm. And all the pollsters, even the Iowa pollsters who have never been wrong, said she would come in 4 or 5 points ahead. Bernie Sanders surprised them. It was a tie. Bernie Sanders, a huge percentage of his voters were young people. Now, this is a big deal. It's a big deal because, not just because Bernie Sanders is 75 years old, and it's all young people who are supporting an old person. I kind of like that idea, actually. I mean, I'm not an old person. But you've got all of this enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders. And the point is, it's not really enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders per se. And this is something that the press keeps on getting wrong, and it's very important to understand. Hillary Clinton's campaign is about Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders' campaign is not about Bernie Sanders. It's about a movement to take back our economy and our democracy from the moneyed interests. I mean, if Elizabeth Warren were running instead of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren would have got at least half of the voters in Iowa. If you have a credible candidate who says, I am changing American politics. I'm going to get our economy and our political system back from the wealthy, from the big corporations, from Wall Street. There's going to be an upsurge for that candidate, particularly in the Democratic Party and particularly among young people who understand they have got to live with what's going on for the next 50, 60 years, and the trend does not look good. So while, and I've said this before, Hillary Clinton is clearly the most qualified candidate for the system we now have, the political and economic system we now have. I've known her for years. She is the most qualified for that system. Her experience, her insight, she understands it. But Bernie Sanders is the most qualified candidate to change the system we now have into a system that is more responsive to you and to me, and an economy that works for you and for me. Because Bernie Sanders is leading a movement. Bernie Sanders is mobilizing. That mobilization, by the way, happened before Bernie Sanders. It was on its way to being mobilized. It's the direct legacy of the Occupy movement. And by the way, just to make sure we're all together on this, after 2008, after the bailout of Wall Street, you had on the right, you had a Tea Party movement, and then you had on the left an Occupy movement, but they both come out of a frustration with what they both sides call crony capitalism, the takeover of our democracy by big money. And I think the goal has got to be, for all progressives, to pull together progressives who are conservative and who call themselves Republican and Tea Party, and progressives who are on the left, and pull together whites and blacks and Latinos and everyone who has a stake in making this country work again. Now, I have other things to say about Hillary and Bernie, but let me just say that this week in New Hampshire is going to be pretty critical. The polls show Bernie Sanders ahead, and Hillary Clinton and her campaign would obviously like to get Bernie's lead way down, under 5%. I'm told by people, my moles in the Clinton campaign. I have moles in every campaign. I do, because I just do. I have people who quietly talk to me. They call me, and they say, this is your Bernie Sanders mole, or this is your Hillary Clinton mole. But I have moles in these campaigns, and the Hillary Clinton mole that I have tells me that their goal is to get Bernie Sanders' lead under 5% in the New Hampshire primaries. They will consider that a victory, because the press will read that as a loss for Bernie Sanders, because it's way, way below expectations. So there you have it. I'm going to answer your questions in a moment. I want to just go on to, I thought that it would be useful to have a little section of this called the worst of the week. Now, it's not the worst person of the week necessarily, it's just the worst thing of the week. And it turns out this week, it does happen to be a person. It's Martin Shkreli. Isn't that a perfect name? I mean, if you had to emit a sound that sounded like this person, it would be Shkreli, wouldn't it? He's just behaving in a Shkreli way. So this is Martin Shkreli. He's the fellow who was CEO of this pharmaceutical company that took this drug. He bought this drug. First of all, it's a drug that's been out for decades, and it's a very important drug for treating people that have immune diseases related to AIDS or any other immune disease, and it's critically important. Or chemotherapy, it keeps their immune system functioning. And what he did, Martin Shkreli, was he bought this drug, and he raised its price from $13.50 to $750 a pill. Shkreli! And what that did is it made it impossible for people to afford it, and we're all paying for it. Now, the reason he's coming up this week is because this morning he was in front of a congressional committee that wanted to ask him questions about how could he go about taking this product, this pill that is needed by so many people, it's decades old, the patent is gone on it, and raise its price so much. And you know what he did? he shkrelied. He sat there, this guy, he sits there with a smirk on his face and refuses to answer any questions. They ask him questions, he refused to answer any questions. So he leaves, and then he tweets about Congress being composed of imbeciles. Well, look, I don't care. Whatever your political persuasion, you may think Congress is comprised of imbeciles, and sometimes I come close, but you don't do what he did. Shkreli. You don't do a Shkreli, and then when you're asked to testify, you come to testify. In fact, he was subpoenaed, he testified, and just sit there and smirk. I mean, he gives every CEO in America a bad name. He gives American capitalism a bad name. He is the essence, Shkreli. He's the essence of what has happened to American capitalism in terms of people being willing to do anything to make money, no matter what the consequences are, no matter what the human cost is. So no more Shkrelis. All right. My book choice this week for you may seem a little odd. It's not a new book, but I want to recommend it anyway. It's a book that I read years ago, and I keep on reading whenever I have a chance. It's called Progress and Poverty. Now, you may not be able to read the title very well because it was published in 1890. My copy, it was written in 1887, by a man named Henry George, who you may not remember. No reason you should remember. But the book is important, Progress and Poverty, because this book is about what was happening in America in the 1880s and 1890s. This is the first Gilded Age. And what Henry George talks about is as relevant to what's happening now in America as it was then. And let me just show you. This is not 1890s. This is what's happening now. This is a graph of wages and salaries as a percentage of the entire gross domestic product, as the entire economy. And we see that, and you can see, in 1960 to today, wages and salaries went down from 51% of the total economy down to about 42% of the total economy. And why is that? Because corporate profits went up largely. And this is 1960 on this side, and this is today over here. Corporate profits went up from 5.1% to 9.7% of the entire economy. Progress and poverty. That's what we have now. The second Gilded Age. All right, your questions. First question, please. I hope I've inspired some questions. Okay, from Leon Chu, how do you counter the skeptics who don't think free college is a viable idea? Leon, I would simply point to recent history. I mean, in the 1960s, we were well on the way to free public higher education. The tuition at many institutions of higher education, including the University of California, but many state universities, was zero. That was our goal. We were there already by the late 1960s. And the only reason we fell back again is that in the 70s and 80s, we started to believe that higher education is a personal investment rather than a public good. It's a public good. It's just like a K through 12. We need educated people. It is also obviously a personal investment, but it's good for the entire country. We did it before. A note, please, two things. One, share this right now if you have any friends who you think might like to tune into this live. And secondly, the little button up there that says subscribe, if you want to subscribe, you can subscribe. I have no idea what that means, but it's probably a good thing. Daniel Dugan, would it help Bernie if he preemptively announced his running mate? And wouldn't Sheila Bair be an ideal candidate choice? Well, I'm not sure it would help Bernie if he preemptively announced his running mate for two reasons. Number one, it may be a little bit presumptuous. That is, you don't have people announcing their running mates this soon before there is even a majority of states have had primaries. Secondly, I think that it may strategically be useful to create a kind of a lot of public discussion about who might be a good running mate for Bernie Sanders. And I think behind your question, maybe one that people ask me, somebody who's 75, the running mate becomes slightly more important than somebody who is, say, 45. Well, that is true, but I want to emphasize with you something that I've said before, and that is Bernie Sanders is one of the youngest 75-year-olds I've ever encountered. He has enormous energy. His doctor said he's in great health, and today 75 is the new 65. Yes, running mate is important. I don't think he needs to announce. Sheila Bair, formerly the head of the Commodity Futures Trading Corporation, would be a very good candidate, eventually. Running mate. Okay, from Anne and McRonis, do you think it would be possible to pass mandatory voting like they have in Australia here? Well, I don't think it would be possible to pass it, Anne, because Americans don't like mandatory anything. But I do think the history, what we've seen in Australia shows that mandatory voting actually is a good idea. Not only is it a duty and a responsibility of citizenship, but if politicians knew that everybody was going to vote, they might be a little bit more responsive to everybody, not only during campaigns, but in every other time during the year, or during a 4-year interval. From William Sharp, what will the next American Revolution look like? Well, William, if you're talking about Bernie's political revolution, I think what we will see will be millions of people mobilized, they're already becoming mobilized, to take our politics and our economics back. And that means public financing of elections. It means reversing Citizens United, a full disclosure of all campaign funding. It means ending the revolving door between government and business, and ending the influence, the overwhelming, disproportionate influence of Wall Street, particularly in the Treasury Department, which is a key place of policymaking in the government. And I could go on. But if you're talking, William, about the next American Revolution in more abstract senses, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, William. We've had one revolution, 1776. It was pretty successful. We don't do revolutions. In this country, what we do, generally speaking, when things get off track, we reform. We did it in the Jacksonian era. We did it again in the progressive era between 1901 and 1916. We did it again in the 1930s. We did it again, to some extent, in the 1960s. We reformed the system. Revolutions, I mean, I'm in favor of the American Revolution of 1776, but they're a little dangerous. Yuli Duboyek, do you think there is a need to create our own Tea Party on the left? Let's call it the Progressive Party or Labor Party. Well, Yuli, I think we are possibly in the midst of a realignment, a party realignment, because for those historians out there, you know that in 1824, the then Democratic Republican Party came apart. I mean, basically fell apart, factional, angry. There were a lot of candidates. The party was never the same. It no longer had an integrity. But that actually gave way to the creation of a modern two-party system. And I don't know if anybody has read Arthur Schlesinger's book about the two-party system, but one of the most important things to understand, I believe, is that in a winner-take-all politics, such as we have, such as our Constitution provides, parties do provide and offer a very important device for both pulling people together and also for filtering and sifting out who's going to become a presidential candidate. Our parties are not doing that any longer. Next question. Well, one final thought on that. I think if the two parties fail this time around, if we have an establishment candidate who is not really going to bring power back to average Americans in terms of political power and economic power, I think that we are ripe for a third party. All right, Spencer Winters. Jeb Bush's campaign has spent the most money and he failed to even register in Iowa. That means he's failed to show anything in Iowa. Does America not want another Bush? or is something else going on? Well, Spencer, it's an interesting question because what Iowa did tend to show is that money is not everything. Obviously, Bernie he did extraordinarily well on the basis of small contributions, and Jeb Bush didn't do well at all on the basis of gigantic contributions. But I don't think you can conclude from that money is nothing. Money is terribly important in terms of running because of advertising, because of the organization you need to actually get out the vote. But if you have a campaign that is based upon a vision of what America can be, and it gets people excited, and people understand what's at stake, such as Bernie Sanders' campaign, it is possible to do exceedingly well, and maybe even win, on the basis of small contributions. That's what we know. That's all we can tell for now. We have time for just a couple more questions. Alia, can you address the age discrimination issues that are pervasive in the tech sector and other industries? Alan, there are laws against age discrimination. But what you were pointing out is that even with laws on the books against age discrimination, there are still examples, pervasive examples of age discrimination in certain industries. You point to the tech industry. I would say it's difficult to pinpoint the age discrimination in a lot of high technology because there is such a bias in favor of young people who ostensibly come in with new ideas and energy and the latest education. But what you need to do with regard to age discrimination, to prove age discrimination, and there are a lot of ways of proving it, but you essentially send in identical kinds of resumes for a job, the only difference being that one is from a much older person who has much more experience, and you see who gets called for the job interview. And if, in fact, you have an industry or a company that shows that kind of bias, that is grounds for a lawsuit. Let me just also say that I have an increasing personal interest in age discrimination. I love teaching. I want to teach at Berkeley. I can think of nothing better to do. I love it. And if they kick me out, they are in trouble. Not that they want to kick me out. Okay, one more question. Jorge Zapata. I just wanted to tell you that there's nothing you should be embarrassed about your years in the Clinton administration. Well, thank you, Jorge. Is that a backwards, kind of a backwards compliment, a kind of a... Jorge, are you suggesting that anybody else in the Clinton administration, or maybe I, might otherwise be embarrassed by my years in the Clinton administration? No, I'm not embarrassed by my years in the Clinton administration. I actually enjoyed being labor secretary, and I like to think we did some good things. The Family Medical Leave Act, and the crackdown on sweatshops, and raising the minimum wage. And Jorge, why do you think I should be embarrassed? I got out of there before there was some embarrassment. But Jorge, thank you for your question. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you for joining us today. I also want to thank my little crew, Zoe Beck. Notice the umlauts over the E. And also Yael, Bridge, two great people, great assistants, and they've helped me, both of them, with your questions and being here. And I will see you next week. Remember, subscribe, if that's where the button is, and have a good week, and pay attention, get involved, stay involved. This is your country, this is your politics. What happens is up to you and to me, to us. Bye.